Welcome to this episode of our program, Daily Debate. As usual, we will be discussing an important topic. Today we'll be speaking about terrorism, or rather how Egypt dealt with terrorism ever since President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi assumed office. And we're speaking 7 years ago, and 7 years ago, President Sisi office to take two tracks, one track to combat terrorism, eradicate such hateful phenomena. At the same time, is sustainable development or the developmental projects. So both went on or in parallel to each other, and the president has been able, the leadership along with the government and all the efforts exerted by the strong institutions Egypt has, and they started the process gaining. Today we'll be speaking about Egypt's continuous efforts to combat terrorism locally, regionally, because afterwards Egypt started to see the regional aspect or the regional issue, and internationally, where it has or longing for its role, or to regain its role worldwide, has started its cooperation with the international bodies. The Egyptian state succeeded over the course of those 7 years to defeat terrorism groups, both in Sinai and throughout the country, by setting integrated strategy. Tonight, we'll be highlighting the strategy that Egypt has been maintaining ever since the president assumed office, how the country was able to overcome such a big challenge, thought programs and projects. We'll be speaking about that with our distinguished guest, Major General Ehab Youssef, counterterrorism expert. Thank you so much for being with us.
It's a great pleasure to be with you, Ms. Mona, and you know it's always enjoyable and thoughtful to be discussing things with you.
Thank you so much. The pleasure is all mine. And before we delve into our discussion, let's first have this quick look on this report on Egypt's parliamentary speaker, measures in international conference in Austria. Let's watch.
أتوجه برسالة إلى قادة العالم أجمع. استمعوا إلى شبابكم، شاركوهم أفكارهم وأحلامهم، أعطوهم الفرصة للتعبير عن أنفسهم، حلقوا في سمائهم عاليا، اجعلوهم سباقين لا تابعين، سلحوهم بخبرتكم وبإيمانكم بهم، لا تتركوهم فريسة لمن يقتاد بطموحهم ويستخدمهم أداة لنشر العنف والكراهية. املأوا قلوبهم بالأمل والحرية والدعم الذي لا نهاية له. افتحوا لهم أبواب الثقة واعطوهم مفاتيح القيادة، فلا حاضر بدونهم ولا مستقبل بغيرهم. استمعوا إلى شبابكم، شاركوهم أفكارهم وأحلامهم، أعطوهم الفرصة للتعبير عن أنفسهم، حلقوا في سمائهم عاليا، اجعلوهم سباقين لا تابعين، سلحوهم بخبرتكم وبإيمانكم بهم، لا تتركوهم فريسة لمن يقتاد بطموحهم ويستخدمهم أداة لنشر العنف والكراهية. املأوا قلوبهم بالأمل والحرية والدعم الذي لا نهاية له. افتحوا لهم أبواب الثقة واعطوهم مفاتيح القيادة، فلا حاضر بدونهم ولا مستقبل بغيرهم.
An Egyptian parliamentary delegation led by Speaker of the House of Representatives Hanafi Gebeli left for Austria, where they will attend the 5th conference for the world's parliamentary speakers and the first international parliamentary summit on fighting terrorism, both scheduled between the 5th and the 10th of September in the capital Vienna. According to a statement released by the House of Representatives, said the 5th Conference for the World's Parliamentary Speakers will discuss several issues, including the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on the future of democracy, fighting the spread of misleading information and the hate speech on the internet, as well as the role of parliaments in supporting rational governance. The statement indicated that Speaker Gebeli and Egypt's delegation will also participate in the first International Parliamentary Summit on fighting terrorism and extremism. The summit is organized by the Inter-Parliamentary Union and the United Nations. It's worth mentioning that the summit is a window for MPs from around the world to discuss vital issues related to combating terrorism, providing support to the victims of terrorist crimes, and the role of parliamentarians in fighting extremist agendas which lead to the spread of terrorism. It will focus in particular on the proliferation of terrorist crimes in the African coast and helping nations in this region to join efforts to find solutions to the problem. The idea of holding an international conference for the world's parliamentary speakers was first proposed in the year 2000. The Geneva-based Inter-Parliamentary Union, in collaboration with the United Nations, decided that a conference for the world's parliamentary speakers be held each 5 years to draft a parliamentary vision on international cooperation in the third millennium. The conference asks world parliaments to take measures towards achieving democracy, respecting human rights, and promoting economic development.
Egypt opens up to the world. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi meets with world leaders.
أعبر لكم عن خالص الشكر والتقدير على حفاوة الاستقبال وكرم الضيافة.
Reaffirming Egypt's vision, delivering our voice abroad.
لتطوير التعاون الثنائي الاقتصادي والعسكري إلى مستويات غير مسبوقة.
Discussing regional and international developments. Solid and strong relations on the path of partnership and development.
Right, welcome back, and back to you, Major General Ehab. And years and years of continuous efforts in order to eradicate such hateful phenomena we're speaking about, terrorism. And let me take here, before I go into this parliamentary delegation heading to, or already headed to Austria to participate in this conference, but let me first take your reading to the efforts that were exerted by Egypt, at least throughout the very, very critical stage that took place during the past 10 years, but let me say precisely 7 years. So tell me about the strategy, this integral strategy that took place, please.
We have to have a little bit historical background about this, because Egypt faced terrorism a long time ago.
Indeed.
And one of the biggest terrorist attacks that happened in Egypt was assassination of President Sadat, if you recall, in 1981.
I do recall it.
And since then we went into a big wave from terrorist activities. Thank God we were able to Egypt as police forces, law enforcement, and as civilians were able to eliminate these terrorist activities. The only thing that kept in the middle between this period and what happened after, and that's why I'm giving this historical background, is the feeling, the inner feeling with some people that the Islamists we didn't take their space to show their capabilities in helping the society. And this small feeling kept with the people till 2011, and when revolution happened in 2011, people found that the Muslim Brotherhood might be an opportunity or this might be an opportunity for Muslim Brotherhood to prove that they are good people and help the Egyptian to have a better life. Sadly saying that when the Muslim Brotherhood took over the presidency in 2012, the people discovered in a very short period of time that we are facing a big fake, and this is not true. They are not good people. They are not honest, and they are going to be harsh on the Egyptians more than any other.
No, we're going to another track
of
a
changing.
new track that Egypt has never been facing before in its whole life.
Exactly, because
And a very dark one.
because on
Indeed.
what that they were planning to do, or what they were trying to do, is to change the ideology of the people itself, and this was very challenging. So the people of Egypt refused this, and they went into a big demonstration that called the 2013 revolution, and we kicked out the Muslim Brotherhood from their positions, and we start living our life. This takes us to your question. Since 2013 till now, this 7 or 8 years, what happened through them? It's that Egypt has had to face the terrorist activities that took place from the Muslim Brotherhood and other terrorist groups that took opportunity of Egypt on the disruption time. Muslim Brotherhoods during the period of the revolution 2013 went into lot of media campaigns saying that if the Egyptians don't give us the power back, we're going to do terrorist activities, we're going to be bombing, killing people, and we're going to be threatening all the Egyptians. And this happened in reality. So Egyptians felt that this is another threat that they have to combat together. President Sisi took the leadership and he set up a strategy. And this strategy was not just set in Egypt, but it was set and announced in international conferences. He clearly mentioned that fighting terrorism cannot be happening in one country. It has to have a cooperation between different countries together by not giving a secure place for terrorists to live in.
Safe haven, yes.
Safe haven, yes. This is one. Second is to try to cut up the funds that go into terrorist groups so they cannot buy weapons and buy their equipment. And on the ground, it was very important to do two things. Raise the capabilities of the Ministry of Interior and law enforcement to be able to combat the terrorist groups and to be able to identify who they are and what they're doing, and to integrate, to get the idea of their thinking, who are the leaders, where they're getting the funds from. It's all about intelligent work.
Tracking their grassroots.
Exactly. So this was one side, is to raise the capabilities of the Ministry of Interior and law enforcement and to be able to combat the terrorist activities, whether we talk about intelligence or facing on the ground by doing counter-terrorism activities, capturing people, trying to put them into jail, put them into courts, and do all the legal activities from this side. On the other hand, sustainable development that should take place to be able to give the people a better life. Because one of the things that make people can be converted into a terrorist is when he start losing hope on life, or when he start don't have any ambition on what his future will be like. This is where the area.
The economic situation of people divert them into real terrorists.
When people are suffering and they don't have hope, this is where they start to be fragile a little bit, and when the extremists can go and start embedding bad ideas into their mind, trying to take them into their side and convert them into another terrorist people to do terrorist activities. So when you start doing development on certain areas, trying to find hope with the people, trying to get them an opportunity to work, and all of these activities, this is something that always very useful in counter-terrorism.
General Ehab, that is the practical thought that Egypt has been through. But as a matter of fact, during the past period, we have faced new kind of terrorism. 20 years ago, terrorism was very obvious. We knew who is the enemy, who belong to, and how to counter them. Today, terrorism is using the most sophisticated ways, and is using even the fourth and the fifth generation. I mean, as there are fourth and fifth generation of war, there are the fourth and fifth generation of terrorism as well. The way they are recruiting our youth, the way they are convincing them, the way pushing them, and hence came this revolution or this battle of awareness. Here I want you to tell me, how do you view how we are putting or investing in our youth in order to raise the awareness, not to get disrupted by the false information they are given, by the false means, and how they are, or to confront and really see what they are up to?
This is a very good question, and I think that there is a lot to do on this area, and I think that the government on a very high level, about the Prime Minister, the Parliament, the Minister of Interior, and other key players on the security sector, has to take extra measures from this side, because one, technology is very sophisticated now, and you can find a kid sitting here or there and he's watching his iPad. You don't know what he's looking at.
Exactly.
While he is recruited on this iPad. Yes.
Exactly.
This is one. Second, the psychology that the terrorists are using is not just a common talk that why don't you come and join us. Very recruiting psychology that can help. And one of the researches that I read is that if someone is ready to be recruited, someone can be recruited, and he sit on the website from one of these guys, from one of these groups for 20 minutes, then he's totally recruited. That doesn't mean that he's going to do a terrorist attack tomorrow, but he, after this 20 minutes, he's recruited, he's going to be joined there, and then he's going to be taken from one level to another, to the extent that he can kill his father, his mother, or he can do any terrorist attack at any time. So it's not an easy thing, and sadly saying that a lot of intelligence are behind this, a lot of institutions are behind this, and for whatever reason it is, and for whatever objective they are doing that for, we're not in a position to discuss this now, but it's not something that's happening haphazardly from uneducated people, and it's just happening on the name of God. No, it's a formalized institutions that know exactly what they're doing, that they have psychiatrists, they have technology, and they have the fund to be able to enter into a society and to convert some people from this society to be able to
control their minds
against others by using their change of mindset. And if you look into the most recent example that we have now, Afghanistan, if you look into the pictures of the 40s, you can see how beautiful it was, how beautiful the ladies, the men, how they were cultured in the way they dress, the way they move. And you can look into where it is now. And this happened by the hands of the Afghanis, not any other person. So, but the mind is not the Afghanis' mind. So if I want to say, hands of Afghanistanis have been used by another mind to destroy the country. This is something that doesn't happen all overnight. It took years and years, maybe 30, 40 years to be done. And at the same time, it's easy. It's not easy, but it's doable to combat it. It's doable to combat it. When you talk about terrorist activities, when you talk about hatred speech, when you talk about extremists, when you talk about misleading information, all of this can be handled if you have policies and procedures, if you have transparency, if you have a way that you can make the people feel that they are united, they are working towards one target. And I think that this is one of the strategic things that Egypt is working on.
Indeed, and Egypt has been working on the issue of terrorism because we have faced terrorism since a very, very long time. And definitely what happened during the past 10 years was exaggerated in terms of that we have been exposed to the terrorists themselves.
Exactly.
And then if we are speaking today after 10 years, or rather after 9 years from this black era, we're speaking here about starting to reap the fruits of what we have been doing in 7 years. And acting region. Returning to this report that we have just seen a few minutes ago, and this Egyptian parliamentary delegation that is going to attend this 5th conference for the world's parliamentary speakers, this summit on fighting terrorism. Let me take your reading to how Egypt is acting regionally and internationally.
Okay. The biggest challenge that will face this very nice, distinguished people on their meeting is to define terrorism. Okay, because
that is one of the most important issues that has ever been mentioned.
Exactly.
Because defining terrorism has been a very big problem.
Exactly. Because without identifying the illness or the sickness, you cannot find the treatment.
Yes.
So if you don't know what terrorism is, you cannot find a way of cooperation. When we talk about international cooperation, I can remember very well on 1986 when former President Mubarak asked for an international conference to identify terrorism. And this has been a request going into the international community several times, but it never happened. When you look now into what are terrorism activities and how you can identify it, it's very challenging. If you go back one step back, if you don't mind, into what we were just giving as an example, Taliban and Afghanistan. Taliban was identified as a terrorist group.
And before we go to Taliban, let's see what's happening in Sinai, for God's sake. And these are the combat operations there by our
These are great people that are doing very
forces.
tough job.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are indeed.
Yes. They are facing death every day, every moment, but they are willingly doing so to protect us and to protect Egypt and make us live with pride. Because if we leave ourselves with terrorist groups, they are going to take us like slaves. So the law enforcement, army and police and the intelligence and the role they are doing there has to be really saluted.
And that is to highlight their efforts in this area, because this area was and still
challenging.
Yes, very challengeable. Please continue.
So if we look into, as we said in the parliamentarian speakers conference, which is going to talk about how to find terrorism, they have to identify what's the terrorism activities, what's the terrorist group, and from then we can start cooperation, because the cooperation should mean that we share information, share intelligence, stop funding, protect banks or ban banks from moving money to
from transactions. Yes,
exactly, and prevent them from receiving weapons, vehicles, and all of these activities, and at the same time don't provide safe haven for any of them to sit in a nice place planning to do activities in another country. Having said that, and the challenge is what is terrorism, we have a big challenge now, especially after what happened in Afghanistan recently, to identify in a common background or an international background what is terrorism. Because Taliban was identified as a terrorist group till like 2 or 3 years ago. Couple of months ago, there was a discussion and meetings between Taliban and United States administration.
Actually, between the Taliban and the Afghani government, which I've never understood. Why would a government discuss with a terrorist group? But okay.
Okay. And at the end of the day, Taliban now is leading Afghanistan. So it's. Would you consider this a terrorist group? Would you fight Taliban, or you would leave it?
Remains to be seen.
Will it be part of the international community? So it's a very challenging one. But going to the facts about terrorism, what have been internationally accepted, even from the United Nations and from other countries, is that killing or burning or destroying on the intention of doing political activities is a terrorist attack.
Yes.
And from there we can start moving, and from there if we put this as a platform, I think that we can start cooperating in either arresting terrorists from country, doing extradition from one country to another, stop stop the funding, and there are a lot of things that can be done. On the other hand, which is very important, and it's not less important than the first one, is education. We have to educate people on what is the goodwill, how to think properly, how to be able to analyze the information that you receive.
That's exactly what I've been, or what I meant about the fight of raising awareness.
Exactly. This is extremely important, because the amount of information that anybody can receive now is huge, and there is no control from the parents over the information that's delivered to their kids. So the only way to protect the coming generation is to give them the ability to have a self-assessment of what's right and what's wrong.
Indeed. Before we continue on with our discussion, let's take this second report for regional stability. Let's watch.
لازم نعترف إن 25 يناير و30/6 حجم الوعي السياسي والإحساس بالوطن ومخاطره مش تضاعف، بقى غير مسبوق. من 6 سنين قلت لكم إن إحنا هنبنيها مع بعض. إحنا هنفضل نشتغل ونبني ونعمر في بلدنا لآخر لحظة. خلونا نحط إيدينا في إيدين بعض. إحنا لا نبغي إلا البناء والتنمية والسلام.
تحيا مصر، تحيا مصر، تحيا مصر.
How Egypt's foreign policy supports regional stability, supporting the stability in the Middle East, Africa and the region, is one of the objectives of Egypt's foreign policy under President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. This has been reflected by different actions illustrating compatibility between approach and actions. The efforts achieved by Egypt to resolve the Libyan conflict, backing the Lebanese government, supporting Tunisian president, reinforcing the Gulf's security, promoting the relations with Iraq and Jordan, supporting development in African countries, and addressing neighboring countries' interferences in Arab countries' internal affairs. Movements exerted by the Egyptian presidency and foreign ministry during the last years echoed the governing trends of Egypt's policy path towards resolving armed conflicts in the Arab world or regional interferences in Arab affairs. Today, Egypt supports the Arab countries that are confronting multiple threats, including infringement on their structures, the growing danger of organizations, organized crime, which all require cooperation and joint security coordination. Through reading in Egypt's power today, regionally and internationally, it's obvious that the state stands at the gate of the peace stable as the holder of an important key, most regional. Egypt also confirmed the move in its traditional Arab and African circles, with keenness to strengthen its relations with the Mediterranean countries and redraw the borders in the Eastern Mediterranean. In order to realize regional stability, the Egyptian approach aims to preserve national institutions and protect them from falling into disintegration, strengthen regular armies, address the spread of armed militias and terrorist groups, reach peaceful settlements to armed conflicts, and stop foreign interferences by regional parties in the internal affairs of the countries in the region.
هو حد عمل زيكم؟ هو حد حافظ على بلده زيكم؟ تعطيل العمل بالدستور بشكل مؤقت.
Right, welcome back, and back to you, General Youssef. And in his speech to the nation marking the 69th anniversary, I repeated, differ from time to time. Egypt's current challenges include terrorism which the Egyptian armed forces and police managed to control. How do you view the current phase of which Egypt is fighting terrorism?
We have to feel the pride that we were able to combat terrorism and to control it all over Egypt after the mess that happened in 2011, 2013. Away from the political scene, from whether the revolution and the successes that happened, but at the end of the day, the security of the country was in danger, and there was a lot of loops and holes that terrorists were able to get into the country from. Especially that when this happened in Egypt, the same happened in Libya. And Libya, as you know, there are tribes, and at the same time there were a lot of weapons that have been stolen from the army in Libya, other than the weapons that the NATO left on the ground before they're leaving Libya after what they did there. So the amount of weapons that have been smuggled into Egypt from the Egyptian-Libyan borders is huge. The amount of weapons that have been smuggled into Egypt from the Sudanese borders with Egypt is huge. And at the end of the day, when you have a vacuum of security with all these weapons in the country and terrorist groups sitting there, it was unexpected to have the stability that we have that we're living in proudly now. So what Egypt was able to do, and the law enforcement, police, army, and the intelligence were able to do during the period, is to recontrol or take the control of the security of the country again, combat these terrorist groups, and we suffered from martyrs and injuries that happened in the police and in the army, and from the civilians as well. But thank God it succeeded at the end, that we are living in stability and security that we can start building on for the future as economic development and sustainable development from the other side. Having said that, this is a period that has been finished, completed. We're proud of it. We're proud of it. Still some challenges in Sinai, but this is not the end of the story, because as we said, there are a lot of changes in the international scene. There are a lot of changes in the region that we're living in.
Geopolitical changes that are really reflecting on the whole situation worldwide.
Exactly.
Indeed.
So this we're not going to be isolated out of this. We cannot build the fence around Egypt and say that we're going to still live peacefully in this country till everything around us gets stable, and then we can remove the fence. So we're exposed to a lot of threats from my point of view. This puts an overload on the intelligence that we need to gather from other countries and from inside, at the same time from the combating groups that are working on counter-terrorism. But the most important is the civilians, is the people, because people are requested to do two things from my point of view, and I may recommend. One is to work as hard as possible to be able to grab the opportunity of raising the economy in a better stage. Second is to share the intelligence information that you can gather by coincidence to the law enforcement authorities. So if you notice then that it's fishy beside you, or the car that parked in front of your house or whatever, it's no harm at all to share the intelligence, to share this information with the law enforcement. They can analyze this information. They see it with value. They can start grabbing more information, and you can be a reason to capture a cell that's planning to do a terrorist attack or a terrorist activity before they do it. And you save lives, you save economy, and you make people live in peace. So I may recommend that people share more information, share more intelligence. I'm very happy to say that from what I know, that there are a lot of information that led into combating of terrorist activities that didn't take place because of the information that was raised before from the civilians. This has really happened, and
yes.
And thanks for these people, and thanks for the people who were collaborating and will cooperate in the future.
Let me take it from other perspective, and since you brought up the issue of Libya and what was going on in Sudan and in other countries, regional and African countries, we have to mention here that on the 2nd of August, this August, the Foreign Ministry launched the National Report on Combating Terrorism for the year 2021. And that was a review to the state's efforts and approach to face extremist ideology and terrorism. How do we link between what we have done of preventing terrorism or combating terrorism domestically and combating terrorism and extremist ideology, putting it as a priority for our foreign policy in how we are dealing to circumstances surrounding regional circumstances and continental ones?
Look, at the very beginning, I mean, when we say the very beginning, let's take 2011 as a benchmark to start from. At the very beginning, international community was refusing to understand what Egypt is doing in fighting terrorism, and they considered any attack that's happened against terrorism is like something that's against human rights and all of this. And we kept, I mean, we as people who have experience on this field, or political activities, or political activists, or the government, we've been trying to convey the message to the international community that Egypt is going into a terrorist period, and we are trying to protect ourselves from this. They weren't able to hear it properly. Till the day come and terrorist activities start taking place in Europe, whether we talk about France, England, Germany, and then the people there are starting realizing that yes, there are innocent people that can be killed while he's going to his work, or he's taking his family for lunch in a place for no reason but to say that there is a terrorist group that is living here and they want to announce a political agenda. Since then, the cooperation started. Not to the ultimate, but at least there are some sharing of information, sharing of intelligence, and trying to combat these terrorist activities or terrorist groups. To the extent that UK had launched a report like 3 years ago, stating that though they are convinced that the Muslim Brotherhood is not a terrorist group, but they said on this report for the first time that they are doing activities that needs to be controlled and monitored, which means that they saw for the first time that the MBs are kind of threat to the UK lifestyle. This I consider a success to the foreign ministry, and to conveying the message, or continuously trying to convince the other side that we need to cooperate, because our enemy is the same. Humanity should be considering that protecting lives, whether it's in Egypt or in Kenya or in United States, is important for humanity, not for just one country.
If we speak about domestically or our internal life, and we are aware, as you said, that we have to invest in our youth because they are the target. They are the main target for recruiting, and they are even the target when they go outside, not just when they are here. It's how they invade their minds. It's how they change their mindset. It's how they put rumors and break their will, break their enthusiasm, their determination, break them from inside. And hence came these social initiatives, and we're speaking here about presidential initiatives and other governmental ones that were declared. And some of them were social, some of them were economic ones, and others were speaking about the PLP, the Decent Life Initiative, the Nasser training courses. There are many initiatives that have been launched during the past period in order to work on the future of our youth. How do you view those initiatives? How do they reflect on the future of our youth really need?
What?
What do our youth really need?
Okay, that's a brilliant question. I really appreciate that. You always ask a very smart question.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
As
much.
you know, and the most of our viewers know that Egypt is 100 million, and we are 60% plus from the youth. So when we talk about 60 million people who need to be taking are very helpful, but they're not enough. Because at the end of the day, we talk about a limited number of people that are approached, a limited number of people that we are going to be able to help them to carry the responsibility by way or another in the future. But what I see best is that, or what I see very important, is to work on the education programs to be able to give the youth, our youth, or our younger generation self-confidence, loyalty, or increase their loyalty to the country. Let them feel that this is their country, and the more you give it, the more you are going to be living in a better life, and to at the same time to give them the tools to have the critical thinking or the analytical thinking to be able to analyze what's
That's another initiative, the supporting entrepreneurship and startups to start their own.
Exactly. This is very important as well.
Please.
So what I want to say is that we need to give them the weapons to fight terrorism in the future. And terrorism is not just carrying weapons. The terrorists, when they try to recruit a person, they don't threaten him by weapon. He enter into his mind. So we need to set up the mind on the way that he can be able to analyze the information that's getting to him and see if it's valuable or not, and start taking the correct measures and actions. If we're able to help our coming generations to think on a way that would...
I only have half a minute.
Yes.
But does this need the collaboration of all institutions, including religious one? Because we are speaking here about convincing them in the religious way is the most threatening one.
You might be, yes, but I see different. I see that we need them to be well educated, well taken care of from the mindset of a human being. Religion, people can be taught in the church or in the mosque. This is not. We need our people to have a self-confidence, to have hope for the future, to see that they can build a better future with their loyalty to their country.
Unfortunately, I had too much other questions to ask, but my time is limited and I have to end it here. Major General Ehab Youssef, Counterterrorism Secretary, thank you so much for being with us.
It's a great pleasure to be with you and your audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And dear viewers, many thanks for watching. Tomorrow would be another debate with another important topic with another colleague. Good night.